This is October 22nd already. We were scheduled for an exam today, but I changed that till next week. So we will have that exam on chapters 9 through 11. Postponed that because we didn't quite finish chapter 11 last week. So we need to finish that today, chapter 11 on evolution, and then move on to chapter 12, diversity of life. And that's a pretty short PowerPoint, so we should get through that today. Maybe even start chapter 13 a little bit. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, so let's go back to that and finish it up. So this is a chapter on evolution and its processes, so how evolution happens. Remember the definition of evolution, change in the genetic composition of a population over time. So it can be small-scale changes or large-scale changes, so it's really just the changes in the genes that are in the individuals in a population. It can be as subtle or as small as just what percentage of a gene in a population is one allele versus another. I use the example of eye color. 50% of the alleles in the American population right now is 50% are blue eye allele and 50% are the brown eye allele. That's the genetic composition with regard to that genetic trait. But if 100 years from now that's different percentage, maybe 70% blue eyes, 30% brown eyes, then that's evolution. There's not necessarily any new species forming or anything. People look the same as they did now, but there's just different proportion of the genes in the populations. Or it could be more drastic changes or accumulation of so many changes. Some genes completely disappear from the population, and other genes appear through genetic mutations. And enough changes can accumulate that whole new species can appear, and previous species no longer exist. We haven't really defined the word species very well yet, but we will later in this PowerPoint. Okay, so it's different between micro and macro evolution. Micro means small, macro means large. Microevolution, just small changes in the allele frequencies or the percentage of one allele compared to another in the population. Macroevolution is large-scale evolutionary or accumulations of many differences in genetic traits usually over longer periods of time. Talked about some ideas related to evolution, or just the beliefs that there was no evolution previously, before Charles Darwin proposed his theory of evolution. I'll go through all of them again. Of course, Darwin is a most important character in the history of the theory of evolution. He's the one who came up with the theory, or the theory of how evolution happens, that it happens, and how it happens, and the way that he proposed that it happens is natural selection. So you need to understand what natural selection is. There has to be variation in a population for natural selection to happen, because in natural selection, some individuals have genetic traits that make them more likely to survive and reproduce and pass on those good genetic traits, compared to others in the population who have less favorable traits that make them less likely to survive, and they're less likely to pass on those unfavorable traits. And so over time, over many generations, the good traits tend to become more common, and the bad traits tend to become less common and maybe even disappear from the population. So this all depends on what the environment is at the time. So, a characteristic that is beneficial in one environment might not be beneficial in a different environment, or if that environment changes. Certain characteristic might not be favorable anymore. So there's no such thing as a perfectly adapted organism, because the environments don't stay the same forever. Adaptation is a moving target. As populations are adapting by natural selection to the environment, there's always something changing in the environment, and so they have to adapt differently. And natural selection can only act on the traits that are already there. Natural selection does not cause new genes to appear in the population. New genes can appear by accident, by genetic mutations, and then if those mutations happen to be beneficial, they make new genes that are good for the individuals that have them, then natural selection will favor them. But in many cases, genetic mutations cause bad genes, new genes that can even be fatal. The individuals that have them won't even survive at all. So the new genes occur in populations just by chance, just genetic mutations, and then natural selection acts on them. But natural selection cannot cause new genes to appear as needed. These factors in the environment that determine who lives and who dies are called selective agents. So it could be anything from the kind of food that's available, or predators that are trying to kill you, or the climate, how much water there is. If you're a plant, there's not enough water for the kind of plant that you are, then you're gonna you might not survive. Okay, Darwin published his theory, or it was a hypothesis at the time, in this manuscript called On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection in 1859. The short version of that title is just The Origin of Species. And he used the term descent with modification. That's his descriptive phrase that means evolution. It just means that modification just means change, and descent means just the generation after generation of individuals. So through the generations, there's change, and the process by which this occurs is natural selection. This guy Wallace came up with the same hypothesis around the same time as Darwin, but Darwin's manuscript was just described it better, and so Darwin got credit for it. Homologous structures and analogous structures, need to know the difference between those two. Analogous structures, features that are anatomically similar in different species, because they both inherited that feature from a common ancestor. And these features, they can look different, but they have some similarities because they were inherited in the two different species. Two species inherited them from the same common ancestor that had that characteristic or a similar one. And the example of a homologous structure is the forelimbs or the front limbs of mammals. They don't all look similar. I mean, the wing of a bat doesn't look a whole lot like the front leg of a horse, but what is similar about them is they have the same bones, the same bone structures. And some of the bones are shaped different, or have gotten longer or shorter, or in some cases, two bones have fused into one bone. But if you examine the bones closely, you'll see that all mammals have a upper arm bone, and then most of them have two forearm bones like we have. But although in some cases those two are fused together into one bone, and then there's some wrist bones, and again, in humans there's 8 of them, but in other mammals some of them are fused together, so there might be fewer of them. But you can still identify that they came from a similar ancestor. Same with the finger bones, hand and finger bones. Even in the wing of a bat, those long, slender bones that support the wing, those are not the bones in your finger. They're just longer, big, different. And so all these mammals, here a bat, a whale, a cat, a horse, and a human, they all have the same or similar bones in their forelimbs. And that's believed to be because they all evolved from a common ancestor, the same ancestor that have a set of bones. They have just, through evolution, have just adapted for different purposes in these different mammals. So that's called homologous structures. Analogous structures is features in different species that look similar or have the same function, but not because they were inherited from a common ancestor that had them, but they just evolved independently in the different species. And wings are an example of analogous structures. The wings, you compare the wings of a bat and a bird and butterflies. They all have wings. They all use them for flying. But those 3 groups of animals did not all inherit that feature from a common ancestor that had that feature. In fact, birds are believed to have evolved from dinosaurs, which didn't have wings. They evolved from the group of dinosaurs that includes Tyrannosaurus rex. Bats evolved from mammals that did not have wings. So they evolved the wings through their own evolution. And butterflies, or any insects that have wings, they all evolved that characteristic on their own. And all insects that have wings evolved from insects that did not have wings. The earliest insects did not have wings. So this is called analogous structures. Each organism or each species that has that structure evolved it itself. They didn't all inherit it from the same ancestor in the past that had that. When scientists try to trace evolution of species or evolution of features like this, it can be confusing because how do you know if these different mammals all inherited that bone structure from a common ancestor, and so how do you know they're homologous structures, or how do you know that birds and bats and butterflies didn't all inherit things from a common ancestor that had them? It can be confusing. You see a similar feature, they all have wings, they might assume that they all inherited that from a common ancestor. But in some cases they did, and in other cases they don't. So it can be confusing. And different species that have similar features can be confusing, and it can lead scientists to assume make the wrong assumptions about evolution. Another case of analogous structures. These two animals look very similar. Sugar glider in Australia and the flying squirrel in North America. They look very similar, but by looking at them, you might think they must be closely related. They must have both so similar. They must have both evolved from a common ancestor that looked something like that. But it's known that that's not true. They're not closely related at all. They occur on continents that are on almost opposite ends of the planet. Those two continents have been separated from each other for hundreds of millions of years, but they just both evolved to look like that on their own. Maybe because they live in similar environments and evolution, natural selection acted on them in similar ways, so they turned out to have similar features, or there's just some chance involved. By accident, they turned out to look similar. Okay, some practice questions. There are some examples of evolution that have been observed in real time. Much of evolution happens so slowly and gradually over millions and millions of years. It takes a long time for a new species to evolve, usually. Sometimes not so long, but usually it's a very long, gradual process. But there have been some cases of evolution by natural selection that have been observed that people have watched it happen. And one example is this peppered moth. It comes in two colors, the light gray ones and the dark ones that are almost black. And used to be more of the gray ones than the black ones, because the black ones on a gray tree trunk, they're more obvious, more visible to predators like birds that like to eat them. The black ones are getting eaten more than the gray ones. But the gray ones blend in; they're like camouflaged on a gray tree trunk. But then, when the Industrial Revolution caused a lot of air pollution, factories, and the tree trunks turned black, and the black moths, the black version, had the advantage. Birds, they would blend in better, and the birds wouldn't see them. But the gray ones are now more visible on a black tree trunk. They got eaten more. And so, there was a change in the population. So there used to be more gray ones than black ones. Now there were more black ones than gray ones because of tree trunks were black from pollution. And when people started caring about air pollution and making in the factories being less polluting, and the air quality was better. The tree trunks weren't black anymore. The tree trunks went back to being lighter colored, and the reverse happened. The gray ones started having the advantage again, and the black ones were eating more. And so the proportions of gray to black went back to the way it was before the Industrial Revolution. So that's evolution. There was a change in the genetic composition of the population. The alleles for the gray color were disappearing for a while because of the change in the color of the tree trunks, and then it changed back. Gray and black. That's a pretty famous example of natural selection. Almost every textbook that explains natural selection uses that example because it's one that was actually watched to happen. Okay, some more words. Don't worry about this math on here. Just ignore that. You don't need to learn this. This Hardy-Weinberg principle is just that in order for natural selection to occur, or in order for evolution to occur in the population, there has to be at least one of these things happening: natural selection, mutations, genetic drift, gene flow, sexual selection. So only a population will stay the same and not evolve only if none of those are happening in the population. But that's almost but that almost is never the case. There's always at least one of these happening in reality in a population. So populations almost never stay the same generation to generation for very long because there's always something causing evolution. And the mechanisms.
What's a genetic drift?
It's coming up here. I'll talk about that. Explain that again. So natural selection we already talked about. Mutation. This means an accidental change in the DNA of a gene, so that a new gene appears, a new allele appears. Genetic drift is just the effect of chance on allele frequencies. Just means that just by chance, certain alleles might disappear from a population. This is not because those alleles are bad or unfavorable. So it's different from natural selection. In natural selection, the allele frequencies change because some alleles are better than others. But in genetic drift, certain individuals that have certain alleles just disappear just by chance, not because those alleles made them less able to survive, But and this usually happens by some kind of natural disaster or something like a flood. If there's a flood, a hurricane, sure. In a hurricane, typhoon, flood, tornadoes. If there's let's say there's a lot of mice in Scotland County, and there are different color mice. Some are very light colored, and some are very dark colored. Yeah, it could be black ones, but if there's a flood, and it's not going to matter what color you are, whether you drown or not, right? So being light colored isn't going to make you swim or survive a flood any better than being dark colored. But what if just by chance a flood would kill half the mice in Scotland County? Half the mice would drown, and just by chance, all of the ones that drowned, just by chance, all of the black mice in the county were in that half that drowned. It's just they didn't drown because they were black. It was just by chance. Now there is no more black mice in the population. Maybe the alleles for black color disappeared. That's genetic drift. Just just some alleles disappear from a population just by chance events. Gene flow or migration, just alleles coming in or out of a population cause individuals come and go from populations, and they bring their alleles with them. So if, for example, there was an island, and everyone on that island was Caucasian, white. But then a few black people would move onto that island, and they would have some different alleles, and so that's a form of gene flow. It's just genes entering a population because individuals enter the population and take those genes with them, or individuals leave a population. So certain alleles would leave with them. So any of these things can cause evolution. Natural selection is the only one that is always adaptive. It always helps the population adapt better to the environment. These others could help or they could hurt that way. Just, but not necessarily adaptive. Okay, talking about genetic drift, just these accidental, by chance, events that cause alleles to disappear from a population, or just change the relative frequencies or allele frequencies in a population. The bottleneck effect would be when I was describing, a bunch of them die, and just by chance the ones who die have a certain allele that now disappears. The other type would be called the founder effect, which would be if a small number of individuals from a large population go somewhere and start a new population. For example, if on one island there's a bunch of people, and half of them have a blue eye allele. Half of the alleles on that population are the blue eye allele, and half are the brown eye allele. And maybe 10 people from that island go to another island and start a new population. If all those people that leave and go to the new island, if they all have blue eyes, they only have the blue eye allele. Now this new population, it's 100% blue eye allele. It came from a population that was 50% blue eye alleles. So that's that just happened by chance. Just by chance, they all had blue eyes, the ones who left. But now that new population is genetically different from the original population. That's called the founder effect, which is a type of genetic drift, just an accidental chance event that causes a change in allele frequencies or proportions of different alleles in the population. This is all a review. Talked about this stuff last time. There's gene flow, two populations of different colored insects. They're all the same species, but one population is all one color, the other population is all a different color. One leaves its population and goes to the other one. Now it's taking this allele for that different color into the other population. That's gene flow. Okay, I think we stopped around here somewhere. Evidence of evolution. Fossils, of course, are evidence of what kind of organisms existed in the past, and that maybe that do not exist anymore. How they're different. How the organisms on Earth have changed in different locations through time. It's called the fossil record. It's just the accumulation of all the fossil evidence that we have. It's assumed that the deeper a fossil is, the earlier in time that species or that organism lived. Not every organism that dies becomes a fossil. It's actually very rare. It has to be under certain conditions. Because most organisms, they die, they just decompose and rot and disappear. They don't become fossils. It has to be certain conditions, like no oxygen, so that the decomposing organisms can't decompose it. Decomposition is just decomposing organisms eating something. So if you die and your body is just laying on the ground, it's going to eventually decompose and disappear because insects and bacteria and fungi are going to eat your body tissues until there's nothing left. But if when you die you're somehow buried in sand or something, and there's no organisms there to eat you, then instead of decomposing, you might become a fossil. But that doesn't happen very often, and in some cases a species could exist for millions of years, and very few or none of them become fossils, and so they don't leave any evidence that they existed. Or they might just be a few fossils from a species, but we never find them. These transitional or intermediate fossils are it's just a fossil that when it is found, it's the first one that we've ever found like it, and it's in between an earlier organism and a more recent organism. So if we have fossils of dinosaurs, and we have fossils of early birds, but what if we then find a fossil of something that's like in between a dinosaur and a bird? That would be a transitional fossil. So the more of these transitional fossils we find, more of a complete history of life we have. And so this, well, I had a picture. There's this Archaeopteryx lithographica. This one was found, I think, in northern Canada somewhere, and it's in between a dinosaur and a bird. This creature, it had features of both. It had its head it had teeth in its mouth. Modern birds don't have teeth. There's no modern bird that has teeth. But this thing had teeth in its mouth. But it had feathers, and this thing. So it was like it had a head. It had kind of like a dinosaur with teeth. But it had wings with feathers, but the ends of the wings had some fingers. Modern birds don't have that. And in the modern bird, some birds have long tail feathers, but the skeleton, the body of the bird ends about here, and this is all feathers. But this thing had a tail, like a dinosaur tail with bones in it. And it had its legs and feet were kind of like a bird. It had claws and scales on its legs like a bird does. So it this was meant to the wings had fingers, and this would be the tail. It's the tail that actually had skeleton or bones in it. So this was believed to be evidence that birds evolved from dinosaurs, because this is a step on the way. So now if we would find another fossil of something in between a dinosaur and this guy, that would be another transitional fossil. Or if we find a fossil of something that was in between this thing and a modern bird, that would be another transitional fossil. So the more of these transitional fossils we find, the more complete record we have. It's the word missing link. The term missing link is often used, or used to be used, especially in the evolution of humans. It's thought that humans evolved from something that was similar to a chimpanzee. Humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. Humans and chimpanzees evolved from a common ancestor, but what was in between? There's not a complete record of fossils in between there. So some people who don't believe in evolution, they say there's too many missing links, many just gaps in the fossil record to say that humans actually evolved from something like a chimpanzee. Okay, vestigial structure. The word vestigial means leftover. So these are features that some organisms have, but it doesn't seem to make sense that these organisms have it, because they have no use for this feature. Why do they have it? Well, it's thought that they have it because it's left over from their ancestors that had a similar feature that was useful or functioning in the ancestor. And so one example is the whales and some snakes actually have hip bones, pelvis bones, and you can't see them because they're deep in the tissues of the animal, and they don't seem to have any function. I mean, whales don't have legs, snakes don't have legs, so why would they have a pelvis? Why would they have hips? Hips are for attachment of legs. They don't have legs. Just thought that those are just left over from their ancestors that did have legs. Cave salamanders that have eyes that don't work. The eyes don't function. Even the eyelids are just fused over the eyes, so they can't even open the eyelids. They don't need eyes because there's complete darkness in a cave. The eyes couldn't see anything anyway without light. So it's believed that they just have these eyes because they're left over from their ancestors that did not live in caves and that did have functioning eyes. So that's believed to be evidence of evolution. Embryological evidence. Features shared by different groups of vertebrates during their embryological development. There was a biologist in the 1800s named Haeckel, and he promoted this idea of embryological evidence. What this means is if you look at the embryo of a developing for a human, for example, you would follow the development of a human embryo. According to this guy Haeckel, you would see all the stages of the evolution of humans. So the early embryo looks like our ancestors, maybe a couple 100 million years ago. And then a week later in that embryo development, it would look like our ancestors 150 million years ago. And then a couple weeks, so as the embryo develops, it's going through the stages of evolution of our past. And there is some truth to that. For example, a human embryo has a tail. And it's thought to be that's because our ancestors had tails. And there are other features that a human embryo has that's are supposedly left over from ancestors. For example, in a human embryo, in an early stage, here's the head and legs. At some stage, there are these pouches or pouches with grooves in between them in the neck. They're called pharyngeal slits or pharyngeal pouches. And think of a shark. Has these gill slits in its neck. Those are believed to be in the human embryo. Those are believed to be left over from our ancestors that were some early fish-like animals that had those slits in their necks. Those pharyngeal slits and the tail, they disappear by the time we're born, but because they were in our embryos, they're thought to be left over. A dorsal hollow nerve cord and a notochord. Notochord is like a long rod of cartilage that every vertebrate has at some stage of its life. The simplest, earliest vertebrates were a lancelet, and it's just this long, slender thing that lives in gravel in the bottom of some streams. And it has this long rod that's like cartilage that runs the length of its body. It has that its whole life. But in a human embryo, it has something like that. Long rod of cartilage, it's called a notochord. That becomes the backbone later on. And there's also a dorsal hollow nerve cord that all vertebrates have, and including humans. But that becomes your spinal cord. So there are these four features: postanal tail, pharyngeal pouches, dorsal hollow nerve cord, notochord. Every vertebrate animal. So that's fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds. They all have these four features at some point in their life, and in many cases, they only have them as embryos. But they disappear before the animal is born or hatched. So considered to be evidence that they all came from a common ancestor that had those four features. But this guy Haeckel was famous. He actually lied about this. He actually drew a lot of pictures, sketches of embryos of different animals, and he exaggerated them to make them look more like he drew pictures of a human embryo developing. He actually drew them to make it look like a fish. And the next one he made it look like a turtle. And the next one he made it look like a little bird. And so he greatly exaggerated his drawings, and so he's considered to be a bit of a liar. But there is some truth to that, the idea that embryos have evidence of evolution in them. Okay, so yeah, so I forgot this was on. So here's a chick embryo. On what is it on? Chick on the left. A chick on the left and a human on the right. And they both have these four features as embryos, showing the pharyngeal pouches there and the postanal tail. Postanal just means behind the anus. Some humans are actually born with a tail, a little tail, and we don't hear about it very much because if you had a baby with a tail, you probably wouldn't talk about that. Or if you were born tail. And it's just removed surgically. Just cut it off. More evidence of evolution, biogeography. Biogeography just means where on Earth the species are located, where they occur. And this is consistent with evolutionary theory. So what we know, when we observe what kind of organisms live where on Earth, it makes sense according to, or it agrees with the theory of evolution. Organisms, that is, we see that some organisms occur for example, on the same continent because they come from an ancestor that lived on that continent. And also we see that some organisms evolve similar characteristics if they are in the same kind of environments. For example, in cold climates, most of the animals will have long, thick fur because that's beneficial in cold weather. And that's what we find. Molecular evidence of common descent, or that means molecular evidence that different species came from the same ancestor. Just the fact that every organism, just about every organism we know of, uses DNA for storing information. the same DNA and used it in the same way. The nucleotide sequence, the A, T, C, and G in a bacteria cell means the same thing as it does in a human cell. ATP, these little rechargeable battery molecules that are used in cells for storing energy. Every organism we know of uses that same molecule for storing energy in its cells. Same for many other enzymes and proteins. They are the same or almost the same molecules in all or many different organisms. All proteins in all organisms are made up of the same 20 amino acids. Even many genes that occur in humans are some of the same genes that occur in many other species. This is one way of trying to determine how closely related two species are. You compare the molecules in them. Compare the genes, of course, but you compare the protein molecules in two different species. Remember, a protein molecule is made up of a chain of amino acids. Chain of amino acids. So if this is a protein molecule in a human, you look at the same protein molecule in a chimpanzee might be exactly the same, except it might just be one amino acid different. And you compare the same protein molecule if it occurs in a bird. The same amino acids, all the same amino acids, except maybe two amino acids are different from the ones in a human. And if you compare a plant that might have the same protein in it, there would be more different amino acids compared to a human. And so the more similar they are, we think the more closely related those species are, because these changes occur by genetic mutations over time. Maybe every million years there's a genetic mutation that causes one amino acid to be changed. And so humans and chimpanzees, they're common ancestors. That is, back in evolution, there was a common ancestor here, and then humans, one population of this species developed into humans, and another population is developed into chimpanzees. And this period of time, since this common ancestor lived, is maybe 10 million years ago. So in that 10 million years, there's been a genetic mutation that caused that different amino acid here. You might have to go farther back in time to find a common ancestor that humans had with birds. And so there's been more time. Might be 100 million years between here and modern humans and birds. So in that 100 million years, there's been more time for more genetic mutations, changes in those proteins. So that's one tool that scientists use to try to figure out what's related, how closely related two species are, how similar are their molecules. Questions. This word speciation. It just means new species forming. So splitting of one species into two or more species, or the transformation of one species into a new species over time. So, so this would be speciation here. There was one species here, and it developed into two species. Or it could be, in some cases, this species will stay the same, but then some of the individuals of this species will lead to a different species. So it could have. One question I've heard asked, people say, if people evolved from chimpanzees, then why are there still chimpanzees? And well, there's two answers. For one thing, humans did not evolve from chimpanzees. They evolved from some earlier primate that maybe resembled chimpanzees. But even if humans did evolve from chimpanzees, there's no reason why chimpanzees should not still exist, because if these were chimpanzees here, this common ancestor was chimpanzees, and this was 10 million years ago, and this population of chimpanzees was in an environment that didn't change very much. So there was no reason for a lot of natural selection to change these chimpanzees into something else. They just stayed pretty much the same. But this population of chimpanzees, they moved somewhere else in Africa where there was a different climate, maybe lived in fields instead of forests. And so this population evolved into humans. So that's speciation. So speciation could involve one species becoming two or more species, or two or more new species, or it could mean an old species still exists, but another species evolved from that species. Okay, I keep using the word species, and the definition of a species, there's more than one definition for this word. And there's no real perfect definition of the word species. A species just is a kind of organism, right? But what exactly does that mean? How do you determine if two organisms are the same species or different? We'll start with this one first. It's called the biological species concept or definition. If you ask a bunch of biologists, what's the definition of a species? This is the answer you get from most of them. A group of individuals that have the potential to interbreed with one another. So if two individuals can interbreed, then we say they're the same species, according to this definition. But this definition doesn't work for all organisms, because many kinds of organisms don't interbreed ever. Like bacteria, one-celled organisms, there's no such thing as interbreeding. Interbreeding means getting together and having some kind of sex and producing offspring like that. So if two individuals can do that, then we say they're the same species. But bacteria are not capable of interbreeding. When bacteria reproduce, they just split in half. So this definition doesn't work for any organism that does not reproduce sexually. We can't really use it. It works fine for animals and plants because they reproduce sexually, but it doesn't work for bacteria or anything that doesn't reproduce sexually. With bisexually, I mean with males and females, sperm and egg, fertilization. So there's this other species concept. There's two others that are described here. This evolutionary species concept. Um, Members of a species share the same distinct evolutionary pathway, and different species can be recognized by differences in traits. So, um, according to this kind of definition, we would say that anything in this evolutionary pathway, we say they're the species. These are the same species because they came from this evolutionary pathway. Whether they can interbreed or not. So, and we look at the traits that they have to try to determine if they, how closely related they are through evolution. So this evolutionary species concept, which is based on traits, is the one that is used mostly for something like bacteria. We can't use the biological species concept. We just we compare how similar these two bacteria cells are, what traits they have in common, and what's different. Maybe compare their DNA, and determine if they're close enough, similar enough that we say they're the same species. And when you do that, you have to make a judgment. How close is close enough? To call them in the same species. The third one, there was another one. I guess only. Well, there are more definitions. There's another one called the ecological species concept, and it's based on how the individuals fit into their ecosystem and what kind of resources they use. But I guess that's not in this textbook. Okay, speciation. What causes speciation to happen? Why would this one species evolve into two species or something? It most often occurs because there's some kind of barrier that separates one population into two populations, and then they evolve differently. So if it's a geographic barrier, then that type of speciation that results from that is called allopatric. Allopatric means in different places. If there would be for example, what if there was this population of something, I don't know, a population of mice, some kind of rodents living in this area, and then a river forms down the middle. A brand new river forms there. And now this population is divided into two populations. These mice can't swim, can't cross the river, so now these are two separate populations. There's no interbreeding between these individuals and these anymore, and so they might evolve differently. Just by chance, different genetic mutations happen here compared to here. Might be different environments. This might be more forest, and this is more fields, something, and so they evolve differently. One of them might stay pretty much the same. The other one would evolve into a different species, or they could both over millions of years become different species. That's called allopatric speciation. New species occurring because of evolution. They evolve differently because some kind of geographic barrier. Could be a mountain range, or could be maybe a lake. There was a lake. Here's a land. Here's the bottom of the lake. So it's a big lake, and now for some reason the water level drops. And now the water level's down here. Now it's not one lake anymore, it's two lakes. These two populations, anything that, any fish or anything, they can't go from one lake to the other. So these are two separate isolated populations. There's no interbreeding between those two. So they could evolve differently. So if one population evolves so much that these are now so different from these that they can't interbreed, they couldn't even interbreed if you put them back together. Now we'd say, according to that biological species concept, that's a new species now. These two kinds of these spotted owls are believed to have an example of allopatric speciation. Live in different forests, believed to be from the same ancestor there, and somehow they got. Well, this is a lot of desert in here. These owls have to be in they like old growth, mature trees, and so this desert area that has formed, this may evolve in a continuous forest at one point. Now, they're now separated by deserts. So they've evolved differently since then. This term adaptive radiation just means one species evolving into several different species. To radiate means to spread out, and so it might start with one species, and then it just evolves into a bunch of just different species. It's called adaptive radiation. And the example of this is these Hawaiian creepers. This is a famous example of adaptive radiation. They also are believed to have come from one common ancestor. This is called the founder species. So this one is believed to have come from the mainland United States or North America, or I don't know if it's supposed to have been from North America or Asia, but this one species got to the Hawaiian Islands, and then on the different islands, different environments on the different islands, adaptive radiation has resulted in these different species of honey creepers. Okay, this concept of an ecological niche, this is an important concept in ecology. The niche of a species, some people say that word niche, but call it a niche. But it's just it says the role of a species in its ecosystem. So everything that a species does, or resources that it uses or needs. If you're an animal, you need a certain kind of food, you need a certain amount of water, you need a certain kind of habitat. and give you a certain place for nesting and having babies and raising them. And you might need some kind of protection from predators. Might need a certain climate. So that's all your ecological niche, where you fit into your ecosystem and what you need, what you use. Okay, so we're talking about allopathic speciations, a speciation that's caused by some kind of barrier, geographic, actual physical separation of a population, dividing it into two populations that evolve differently. Sympatric speciation. Sympatric means in the same place. So in this case, a population is not divided by a barrier. They're still all in the same place, but part of that population will become a different species compared to the other one, even though they still live in the same place. And some examples. One example of this is what has happened in some plants. Plants are just like animals, like us. In that there are diploid individuals, that is, have two sets of chromosomes. Like we have two sets of 23 chromosomes in our cells. Plants, same way. But there have been some accidents in plants when they were making sperm or eggs. It's called non-disjunction. I think we talked about that in this class, non-disjunction. So when in meiosis, when sperm or eggs are being made, remember there's chromosomes are duplicated, and then when this cell divides the first time in meiosis 1, they supposed to one from each pair goes into each daughter cell. So this daughter cell would get one number 1 chromosome and one number 2 chromosome. This would get the other number 1 chromosome and the other number 2 chromosome. And then they divide again. Now the sister chromatids. Remember, each of these chromosomes is still duplicated. Now these sister chromatids separate and go into the daughter cells. But what if by accident non-disjunction happens, which means all 4 of these sister chromatids would go into one daughter cell. This one would get none. Now this is not diploid. Diploid means this is a sperm or egg. It has twice as many chromosomes as it's supposed to. Now if this was a sperm, it has 2 number 1 chromosomes and 2 number 2 chromosomes. It would fertilize an egg that has 1 of each. Now that fertilized egg would be like this. It would have 3 number 1 chromosomes, 3 number 2 chromosomes. So it's triploid. It's supposed to be diploid. So this can't if this grows into a plant, all of its cells are triploid like this, and now when it makes sperm and egg, its sperm and egg are going to have too many chromosomes, and so it's not going to be able to. A sperm from this plant is not going to be able to fertilize a normal diploid plant. This is the wrong number of chromosomes. But this could mate or breed with other triploid plants of the same species. So now that's a new species. These triploid individuals cannot interbreed with the other diploid plants of that species, but it can interbreed with other triploid plants of that species. So that actually becomes a new species. So that's called polyploid, polyploidy. Too many chromosomes, or more than the normal number of chromosomes. So this is how a new species can occur like overnight in one generation, just because of this mistake in meiosis, making sperm or egg. Now there's triploid, or in some cases tetraploid, 4 sets of chromosomes instead of 2, and it can only interbreed with other tetraploid individuals. So that becomes a new species. So this is sympatric speciation. It doesn't happen because of geographic separation. They're still all living in the same place. The triploid ones could still be living among all the diploid ones, but it's a different species because it can't interbreed with the diploid ones. It can only interbreed with other triploid ones. Sexual selection, another way that sympatric speciation can happen. In most species of animals, it's the females that choose their mates. And usually for some reason, there's something that they find attractive in the mates, in the males. Again, we know that in deer, the females like big antlers. More attracted to the males with the large antlers. And so they're more likely to mate, to choose males with large antlers. But and in birds, it's often the colors. The males are bright colors, color patterns, or the way the birds sing. The females are attracted to the males' songs. What if there would be a genetic mutation that would cause the males that have this genetic mutation? Maybe it's cardinals. Cardinals are common red bird here. They sing. There's a certain song that cardinals are supposed to sing. The males are supposed to sound a certain way to attract the females. What if there's a genetic mutation, and now for some males who have that genetic mutation, they have a completely different song, and most of the females don't like that. It's different. They're expecting to hear the normal song. But what if there's a few female cardinals out there who think, yeah, I like that. I prefer that new song to the old one. And so now most of the males still sing the old way, and most of the females still attracted to that, and so they mate together. But now there's some males with a different song, and some females who prefer that one. So they only mate together. Now, but they don't interbreed together. Certain females only like the new song. Other females only like the old song. So these interbreed together, but they don't interbreed with the other group anymore. They become different species just because of that sexual selection. What if some females deer decide, I only like males with that have only one antler? might be a few males out there who have some genetic mutation, so they only have one antler. So certain females will only breed with those. They don't like two antlers. So anything that's would cause them to only breed with certain ones and not the others, that's essentially a new species, according to that biological species concept. Well, let's take a break. Finish this. Almost done. Hmm. Here, codings here, right? Haley, Simone, still on break. Jacob, here again. Montreal, not here. Ria and Sharika here. Amazia, not here. Tyson, Cameron, and Rylan, not here. Okay, let's finish this chapter and do the next one. Next chapter is short. The PowerPoint is short. Okay, so we talked about allopatric speciation and sympatric speciation. Allopatric is a speciation that happens because the population is divided by a geographical barrier. Sympatric is something that causes the population to become two different species, even though the individuals are all still in the same place. There's no geographic barrier. This alloploidy, this just involves hybridizing, or two closely, in some cases, two different but closely related species can interbreed, but their offspring are not fertile. Their offspring cannot reproduce. So we would still not call them the same species because they cannot produce fertile offspring. So when this happens, and the reason or a reason that these hybrids usually cannot reproduce is if you got one animal that has, let's just say it has 2 chromosomes per set. So it has 2 sets of 2 chromosomes, and this other animal has 2 sets of 3 chromosomes. So this one would make a sperm that has 2 chromosomes in it. This one would make an egg that has 3 chromosomes in it. If this sperm with 2 chromosomes fertilizes an egg with 3 chromosomes, that's not going to work very good. Because now it's going to end up with a fertilized egg that has an odd number of chromosomes. It's going to have 2 chromosomes from one parent and 3 from the other. Normally, when 2 parents reproduce, one produces like in humans, one sperm has 23 chromosomes, the egg has 23. They come together and fertilize. And now there's 2 sets of 23 chromosomes, like it's supposed to be. But this isn't going to work. 3 chromosomes from one species, 2 from the other. So this is why these can't usually reproduce. It might, and some hybrids can survive and live, but they usually can't reproduce. What's going to happen when that tries to make sperm or egg? It's got 5 chromosomes. It's not even an even number. what's going to end up in the sperm and egg. But if you would take this hybrid offspring that now has 5 chromosomes, if you could if that would be doubled because of non-disjunction when this organism is making sperm or egg, it would make a sperm that has all 5 chromosomes in it, and another one of these animals would make an egg that has all 5 chromosomes in it, and they would fertilize each other. Now you have 2 sets of 5 chromosomes. Those hybrids could now be fertile. So this is just a this is what has been done for some crop plants. If you want to cross 2 different species of crop plants together, you get something weird like this, and they're sterile. They can't reproduce. What good is that? Now you have a plant that can't reproduce. But you want it to be able to reproduce, so we can grow more of them. But if you could get it to this kind of non-disjunction, so that it would make sperm and egg, each with all of its chromosomes. Normally, sperm and egg have just half of the chromosomes. But if you could get to make sperm and egg with all of the chromosomes from both different species parents, then you cross those together, sperm and egg, like that, then you get an individual hybrid that has 2 full sets of chromosomes. Now it could reproduce. But anyway, that's called alloploidy. And there are several different crop plants that have had that done to them, and it even says how many of these they actually have 6 times the normal number of chromosomes that they've done with these hybrids just to get them to be able to reproduce. Anyway, example is sympatric speciation. These fishes in Nicaragua, evidence of sympatric speciation. Populations have evolved from one species, two distinct morphologies. So two different species evolved from one within the same lake, so they weren't separated geographically from each other. Distinct morphologies and diets in an early stage of speciation, so they're not yet different species, but it doesn't tell us what caused that. What caused that to happen? Could just be a genetic mutation caused one species to start eating one kind of food, and the old species continued to, or the other fishes continued to eat the old diet, and that could be enough. Just a difference in diet could be enough that they would are now on different evolutionary paths. Okay, some misconceptions about the theory of evolution. Well, first, that it's just a theory, and people say that sometimes. People who don't believe in evolution and argue against it. One of their arguments is that even scientists say it's just a theory, or it's only a theory, but people say that don't know what the word theory means in science. In science, the word theory means as close to a fact as you can get. And so evolution is considered, within science, is considered to be a very well supported concept. Individuals evolve. So, evolution happens to populations, not, or species. It doesn't happen to individuals. An individual, one organism doesn't. I mean, we can change. A person can change, or an organism can change, but that's not what we mean by biological evolution. It's entire populations or species that change, that evolve over usually many generations. Evolution explains the origin of life. It doesn't. It doesn't tell us anything about where the first organisms came from. It only tells us how life has changed since then. Organisms evolve on purpose. Like I was saying, evolution only acts on the genes or alleles that already exist, and ones that happen by mistake. New genes appear by genetic mutations, which are just mistakes, and then natural selection acts on those genes. But if the climate is changing, it's getting colder, and animals in that climate would really benefit from having longer, thicker fur, that's not going to cause them to have a genetic mutation and make a gene for longer, thicker hair. If a mutation does happen that causes those individuals that have that mutation to have longer, thicker hair, then natural selection will favor that trait. But traits just don't appear as needed in a population. Evolution is controversial among scientists. There is a surprisingly large percentage of people who don't believe in evolution. Even in the year 2020, a lot of people still think this is not true. But within science, among scientists, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think it's probably 99% at least of biologists. In my whole life, I've met one biologist who didn't believe in evolution. And he believed in microevolution, but did not believe that new species come by evolution. And his reason for believing that was religious. It was not. He didn't reject evolution on scientific reason. It was just purely. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, and they're very strict fundamentalist Christians, and have a very, I guess, literal interpretation of the Bible. He wouldn't accept evolution. Other theories should be taught. I don't know if that's a misconception. That's personal opinion. I won't say anything about that. But other theories, I guess, creationism. I'm not going to comment on that. Any questions on evolution? Like I said, if you're one of those people who doesn't believe it, that's fine. But we just need to learn what it is for this class. Okay, chapter 12 it's only 18 slides. I didn't make most of these. I only made the last 3 PowerPoints. These others were made by other instructors. Change the recording here. Okay, after 12, diversity of life. Diversity just means the variety. So this is about the many different kinds of organisms on Earth. Mask makes my glasses fog up sometimes. Can't see nothing. Hey, well, this example here, a bee and a butterfly, or a bee and a flower, are one's an animal or an insect, which is an animal. The other is actually obviously part of a plant. We think of them as not as being completely different kinds of organisms, but if you go back far enough in history, they have a common ancestor. Both came from the same kind of organisms in the distant past. In fact, all life on Earth is believed to have come from one common ancestor. So the very first form of life was something similar to a very simple bacteria cell. And all the species that have existed since then have come from that one first organism through a lot of evolution. And scientists have been trying ever since they started studying evolution and paleontology, or the study of fossils, and trying to figure out how all this happened. They've been using these diagrams called phylogenetic trees, or trees of life, or evolutionary trees. And they are branching diagrams like this. This is one phylogenetic tree. Even Charles Darwin, in his notebook, his journal, there were some sketches of simple evolutionary trees that he was trying to formulate to describe the relationships between some of the different organisms that he was studying. So this was showing all of the forms of life, all of the major groups of organisms on Earth. So over here on the left, this is all bacteria over here. These are all eukarya, and these are archaea. And so those are the three domains. And as we see, like I've said in here, we were talking about bacteria and archaea before. It used to be thought that bacteria and archaea were the same. They were one big group. They were so similar. They're one cell, eukaryotic, tiny little organisms. But as you can see from here, the archaea are more closely related to the animals, plants, and fungi than they are to the bacteria. They're a completely different branch of this evolutionary tree. We don't know what happened down here, but going back before this, how these two branches connect. But we know that now, mostly from comparing the DNA of these different organisms. The DNA of these archaeans, one cell, weird things that look like bacteria, their DNA is more similar to DNA of animals and fungi and plants than they are to the bacteria that they look like. So that's why just 25 years ago or so, it was decided we shouldn't be together in one group. We need to create this whole new level of classification called domains and put the bacteria in this domain, archaea in this domain, and all the eukaryotic stuff in another domain. Eukaryotic. Hey, so in this tree of life, of course, the base of the tree, or the bottom of the tree, is the earliest organism. At the tips of all the branches would be the modern organisms that still exist. But along all these branches, there have been many side branches, many thousands and thousands of little side branches. And most of those little side branches and life forms that have existed along these branches, they're almost they have been successful for a million years or several million years, but eventually they went extinct. And they were just dead ends, and they're not even shown on here. But, only the ones at the tips are result from lineages that never went extinct. To something else, to something else, to something else. Got us to what we have now, the life forms we have now. Okay, this word phylogeny, because it's a phylogenetic tree. The word phylogeny just means the evolutionary history of an organism or a group of organisms or species. How they're related to each other in through evolution history. And that's where systematics is the study of evolutionary relationships. And trying to figure out how different species are related to each other, what evolved from what, and taxonomy, which is classification of organisms into the different groups of families and things and stuff, is based on systematics. We try to put all the animals that are in the same family, we put them in that same family because they're closely related to each other through evolution. So the systematics uses fossil evidence, molecular information like comparing DNA and protein molecules, like we talked about previously, and the morphology just means the form of an organism. So comparing the physical forms of organisms, we use that kind of information is what's used for trying to make these phylogenetic trees. Question there, it says, based on the following phylogenetic tree, which group is more closely related to the slime molds, fungi or animals? And so there's the slime molds, there's the animals, and there's the fungi. So along this main branch, the animals are closer to the slime molds than the fungi are to the slime molds. So, you think of slime molds because they look similar to fungi. You think that they'd be more closely related, but slime molds are actually more closely related to you than they are to fungi. Okay, taxonomy is the science of naming and classifying organisms into groups. These groups are called taxa. Singular is taxon. So these are the different taxa, or the different levels of classification in taxonomy. There's domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus. And there are other ones even in between. If you get into taxonomy, if you take a course in plants or insects or something, if you're learning the taxonomy of insects, you find that there are other levels in between some of these. Like there's a subclass and superorder and subfamilies and superfamilies and even subspecies. And in some cases, the scientists don't stick strictly to this. They add other ones in between if they find it convenient to do that. Scientific nomenclature. Nomenclature just means the words or the names of things. So every organism that has been studied is given a binomial scientific name. Binomial just means two words in the name. So that's called a scientific name or the species name. So Homo sapiens, Felis catus. Those are the scientific or species name. And the first word is the same as the genus. The species is two words, but the first word is the same as the genus that species belongs to. So Homo sapiens, that's us. We belong to the genus Homo. The second word is of the specific epithet or the specific name. Both words together make up the species name or the scientific. Okay, so here shows some examples of what's included in some of these examples of some of these taxonomic groups, taxonomic levels. So in this case, the domain here is eukaryote. So that's all the organisms that have eukaryotic cells, that is cells that have a nucleus and other organelles. Then that includes plants, really blurry. Fish, what's that word? Insect. Insect, fish, rabbit, cat, fox. These words. Anyway, so the kingdom eukaryote includes plants, animals, fungi, protists. But if we go down one level, the kingdom Animalia. Now this includes all these animals, but it doesn't include the plants. Plants are in a different kingdom. Fungi are their own kingdom. So we narrow it down a little more. This phylum Chordata. This is the vertebrate animals. So it includes everything with a backbone: fishes, mammals. These are all mammals. And it also includes birds and amphibians, but it does not include insects. Insects don't have a backbone. Then within a chordata, class Mammalia, the mammals, and so that includes all these most of these, but it doesn't include fishes. Fishes are not mammals; they're in a different class. Birds and fishes fishes and reptiles and amphibians, those are in different classes. The mammals are family. Within that class, there's an order Carnivora. Carnivorous, mostly predators eating animals. The cat family, the dog family, and so on. But it does not include rabbits. Rabbits are not carnivores. So within the order Carnivora, one of the families is Canidae, the canines. So foxes, jackals, wolves, dogs, but not cats. They're in a different family. Felidae, which is a feline. Then within this canine family, there's a genus Canis, which includes jackals, wolves, dogs, but there's other genera like the foxes, bullkeeps, another different genus within that family. And then within that genus, there's several species that all have Canis as the first word in the species name. So Canis lupus is the gray wolf. And dogs, domestic dogs, are actually gray wolves. They evolved from gray wolves. So, but the domestic dog is considered a subspecies of the gray wolf. So the species Canis lupus, but it has a subspecies named familiaris. Lupus familiaris. That's something that 20 years ago, it was dogs were considered to be a separate species from the gray wolves. And so, but it was decided no, they're still the same species as gray wolves, so we'll call them a subspecies. So these things are always changing, just changing their mind. Used to be like rabbits used to be considered rodents. They're not considered rodents anymore because their teeth are a little different from the rodents, and so they put them in a separate order called Lagomorpha. Like we saw, each sub-level in the taxonomic classification system, organisms become more similar. So that just means that all of the organisms in this class of Mammalia, they're all more similar to each other than all of the organisms in Mammalia. Some of these, like the insects, are not very similar to rabbits. They're not very similar to cats. But within these smaller groups, they're all more similar to each other. We talked about dogs and wolves. Which level of taxonomy dogs share with cats? The dogs and cats are both mammals. They're both carnivores, but they're not both canines. So the dogs and cats are all in all of these groups, but only dogs are in this family Canidae. Cats are in a different family, the Felidae. It says level of taxonomy do dogs share with rabbits? That's they're both mammals. Dogs and rabbits are both mammals, but they're not both carnivores. Dogs are carnivores, but rabbits aren't. So these dogs and rabbits are all in these groups together, but not in you get the picture. Okay, a phylogenetic tree reflects hypothetical evolutionary relationships. So it's a diagram that's we're trying to put on a diagram how all these organisms on that evolutionary tree are related to each other. A branch point is anywhere where the one branch comes off another one, and there's usually only two from a branch point. There's usually only two lines. It's unusual to see this where there's three lines coming from the same point. This is all, and because this doesn't mean that we really think it happened this way, that there was one ancestor that split into three directions, into three lines of evolution. It just means that we're not sure what happened here. We're not sure if it was, it could have been, like this branch came off and then this came off of that, or it could have been like this, and we don't know which, so we just draw it. We don't know which way it was, so we just draw it. Like all three coming from one point. Oh, sister taxa, blah blah blah. Oh, here's another. Some of these are drawn vertically, like an actual tree with a vertical trunk, and then it branches out. Some of them, very often they're drawn sideways like this, so there's the trunk or the base of the tree is actually on the left. And so the original common ancestor is all the way to the left. So everything over here to the right supposedly evolved from this one common ancestor. And it happened in these different steps. So this common ancestor, at some point during its existence, it evolved a vertebral column or a backbone. And then some of these individuals evolved a hinged jaw. This split into two populations, and one population stayed pretty much the same. This lancelet. This is probably pretty much the same now as it was hundreds of millions of years ago. It hasn't changed very much. But all this other stuff, this hinged jaw, appeared. And so now everything over to the left or to the right of this point has hinged jaws. Probably. And in some cases, characteristics disappear through evolution, but all of these actually do have hinged jaws. The lamprey is a fish that doesn't have a hinged jaw. It has a round mouth with teeth on it. So the lampreys didn't have a hinged jaw. But then this population of these animals with hinged jaws, they evolved legs. So all these fishes, frogs, lizards, rabbits, these have legs. Fishes never did evolve legs. Most fishes. And then this kind of egg that has an amnion is only in lizards and mammals. Frogs don't have an amniotic egg. And hair. Some of these animals with an amniotic egg called hair. And mammals did, lizards have scales. So this is how one way that these evolutionary trees are drawn based on appearances of certain characteristics along the way. Okay, assumptions. Even though a lizard and salamander look more similar, lizard and rabbit are considered to be more closely related because they both have that characteristic, the amniotic egg. So it might be tempting to say, well, these two, the salamanders and lizard, look similar, so they must be closely related, but it's usually more accurate to focus on individual characteristics like the amniotic egg or the hinged jaw. If two closely related species evolved in different surroundings, they will likely have different appearances because the surroundings or the environment is what drives evolution. It causes organisms to adapt certain ways. So two populations of a species are in different environments that could cause them to evolve differently. And end up looking different, even though they're closely related. Example there, dolphin and camel. They don't look anything alike. They're both mammals. They both have the characteristics of mammals. But one evolved in oceans and one evolved in deserts on land. They look a lot different. If two distantly related species evolved in similar environments, they will likely have similar appearances. Example, a dolphin and a shark. So this is like the opposite case. A dolphin and a shark, one's a mammal and one's a fish, so they're not closely related, but they both evolved in the same environment. And so they kind of look alike. They have that streamlined shape. They have fin-like. Fishes have fins, but dolphins have flippers that look like fins. Even though they're not closely related, they look similar environments that they have adapted to. It says branches on these evolutionary trees, they only tell us the order in which they occurred. They don't tell us when they occurred or how much time. So this only tells us that the hinged jaw evolved and appeared before legs did, but it doesn't tell us how many millions of years evolved. Some evolutionary trees are drawn that way, so that how long this line is would be like 1 inch equals 10 million years or something. But this one is not drawn that way. Hey, we already talked about homologous and analogous features in the previous chapter, but something I noticed I was looking on here is this tells us something that's different from the previous chapter. In the previous chapter, we said that said that the wings of birds and bats and insects are analogous because they evolved separately. They didn't all inherit it from a common ancestor, and so it says that the wing of a bird and a wing of a bee are analogous. So that's what we said earlier, but on the well, here it tells us that the wing of a honeybee, the bird and bat wings are homologous. That's the opposite of what was said in the previous chapter. It said that the wings of a bird and bee and bat are analogous because they evolved them. They did not even inherit them from the same. Here now it's saying that the wing of a bird and bat are homologous. And so but why they say that is because bird wing and bat wing both have bones in them, and so both birds and bats inherited bones from a common ancestor that bones. So this is a case where you can consider them to be homologous in one sense, but analogous in another sense. Okay. We already talked about this molecular systematics, just comparing the molecules in different organisms. How similar they are is believed to indicate how closely related they are. And this cladistics is just cladistics is this method of making phylogenetic trees based on the appearance of characteristics along the way, which characteristic occurred first, and then which organisms after that appeared have that characteristic. This is called cladistics. So a clade is a group of organisms and their common ancestors. So that phylogenetic tree that we were looking at, the sideways one, that we would consider all those organisms on there to be a clade. And so the ancestral character is a characteristic or a trait that is in all of the organisms, including the common ancestor. A derived character is any one of those characteristics that appeared since then. So back here. So shared characteristic would be the vertebral column because they all have the shared, they all except the lanceolate have the vertical column. So that would be a shared characteristic of all of these. But a derived character means just any of these that were derived or they appeared later than a common ancestor. Skipped over this. The humans and chimpanzees are very closely related, but the chimpanzee jaw protrudes to a much greater degree than human jaw. So the human head and a chimpanzee head look pretty much different because of the shape of the lower jaw. On a chimpanzee, it sticks out much more. In a human, even though they're very closely related. Okay, so okay, so this is Wolf Awareness Week. Did we watch a video in here about wolves? Did I show video. Um, this is only a few minutes long, 4.5 minutes or so. But it's really cool. I think it's cool. It's about wolves in Yellowstone National Park. You guys have been there, Yellowstone, in northwestern Wyoming. Um, and back in the early 20th century, wolves were hunted, were just killed until there were no more wolves in Yellowstone National Park, because wolves used to be considered to be pests, because the ranchers hate wolves because they kill their livestock. And some hunters don't like wolves because wolves eat with them. Wolves kill the same animals that the hunters like to kill. And so back in the early 20th century, the wolves they were all killed, so there were no more. But then there weren't any wolves in Yellowstone Park until 1995, and it was wildlife biologists decided to deliberately put wolves back into Yellowstone Park, to reintroduce them. And wolves are a top-level predator, so that means they're at the top of the food chain. Nothing kills and eats wolves except maybe humans kill them, but they're at the top of the food chain. And so, wolves, a top predator like that, if it's removed or added to an ecosystem, it can affect all the other organisms. Because, since the wolves disappeared, there have been too many deer, elk in Yellowstone. Too many, because the wolves aren't there to kill them and keep the populations down. So many deer and elk that deer and elk eat grass and plants, and along the rivers there's not enough plants. They just eat all the plants. The trees don't get very high because they eat them, or they can grow very, very high. And so when there's not enough vegetation on the banks of a river to hold the soil in place, it causes a lot of erosion. When it rains, the soil runs into the river. When there's any bend in the river, the river just cuts into the bank of the river more easily, and there's no vegetation to hold the soil in place. So because there's not much vegetation there hasn't been as many birds, and wolves also kill coyotes. Some coyotes, and now there's too many coyotes in Yellowstone, and so too many coyotes that eat rodents. There's not a normal amount of rodents, and not as many hawks, because hawks like to eat rodents too. So when these wolves disappeared, it completely changed the normal community of plants and animals, and even changed the rivers in Yellowstone. And anyway, this video is about what's happened since they reintroduced wolves in Yellowstone in 1995. It's pretty cool. Come on. Can't even see the arrow. Sorry. The screen, the bottom's cut off. I can't see the. Okay. Start it over. Okay, I'm getting frustrated here. What are the most? All right. Sorry.
findings in the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, that the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they managed to reduce much of the vegetation to almost nothing. They just raised it in a way. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. More significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys, gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. As soon as that happened, birds started moving. The number of songs of migratory birds started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes. And as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. Here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed. More pools formed. More riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitat. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there's soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. The wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
Okay, so this is the kind of thing that this kind of thing that ecologists like to study because we know that all species are connected, and but we don't know exactly how. What's the effect of one species on all the others? What would happen if one species disappears? In a case like this, it has a tremendous effect on everything else. Okay, well, that's enough. Next week is that exam on chapters what? 9, 10, and 11.